Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're tuning in to listen to our Lead Integrity podcast, a conversation and a discussion with some of our most amazingly competent and faith inspired, different faiths, different continents, different areas of expertise, and a conversation basically about life and perspectives on leadership, especially, albeit not only that of women who are inspired by different faith traditions and who serve in different capacities around the world. Lead integrity is a unique space for these conversations. Many often shy away when the word faith gets mentioned. We are quite proud of the fact that we understand very well that faiths, different faiths in different things, are actually an important source of inspiration. And that those of us who lead with that inspiration can often add a wee bit of value to the world around us and the issues that we are tackling. And to that end, I'm delighted to welcome one of our senior advisors at Lead Integrity, and that is Miss Vicki-Ann Assevero. And it took me a year to convince Vicki to come on board, but she finally has, and we're delighted to have her with us today so she can speak to her own wisdom and experiences. But who is Vicki? Let me read to you her bio. Vicki-Ann Assevero is an accomplished international lawyer, advocate, and social entrepreneur with a long-standing expertise in sustainable development. A former partner at Holland Knight, she represented multinational energy companies, international organizations, and many developing countries in their relationships with international financial institutions and private investors. Early in her career, she worked at the US Commerce Department and the OECD in Paris on issues surrounding personal privacy on digital platforms. As you can see, Vicki-Ann is way out there in terms of the issues and the times, and very much needed. Those kinds of skill sets are precisely what our world is dealing with today. But she also has special expertise in convening multiple stakeholders across disciplines and mediating inputs, facilitating ideas, and leading to policy options. Through the implementation of these negotiated solutions, she has been quite amazing at creating communities of practice. One more thing of a huge repertoire that I think is very important for us to know about Vicki. She founded the Green Market Santa Cruz in 2012, which is an experiment in community-based sustainable development. The Green Market was recognized in 2016 by the United Nations Environmental Program as an example of integrated sustainable development in practice. And she maintains a deep commitment to fostering food and nutritional security. She was an inaugural senior fellow for the Caribbean Initiative at the Atlantic Council, and also a fellow at the Berkeley College at Yale University, which is her alma mater. She received her JD from Harvard Law School and an LLM in Sustainable Development Diplomacy from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. Vicki-Ann Assevero, we are delighted to have you with us here today. We're very honored that you are one of our senior advisors in Lead Integrity, and I am particularly thrilled to be able to have an opportunity to share and listen to some of your wisdom in the next hour or so. So thank you so much for making it to be with us.
Thank you so much, Azza. As I listen to all of that, I am astounded by how much time has passed and how many things have been done. Yes, one tends to forget.
I think, Vicki, it's interesting to see the trajectory of your career over time. And I guess one of the things I am particularly interested in is, you go from being a lawyer advocate to being such a leader in sustainability and environmental issues. Maybe you can share a little bit with us this journey, the journey of your career and how you came to be doing these different things at different times. One doesn't automatically think of high-powered lawyers as leaders of sustainable environmental programs that actually succeed and get recognized. So tell us a little bit about what motivated you and how you chose your different careers.
Well, This is, as my daughter would say, a vaste programme in French, you know. Eh, what I'm thinking about most immediately is a conversation with a young woman the other day who found me on LinkedIn and asked me the same question about my trajectory. And what I was able to tell her was in the time 30 years ago or so, we were talking about industrial development. That was the way, even earlier than that. Industrial development. How do you put industries in developing countries? That evolved into Millennium Development Goals and ultimately Sustainable Development Goals. So I put that down as a platform to say how language changes our thinking about what development is and what is required for countries to develop. So let's say I come from Washington, D.C. That is the diplomatic capital of the United States. I did happen to grow up actually next to two African embassies came to install themselves nearby Dahomey, which is now Benin, to show another change, and Sierra Leone was not that far away. So there was that as a child, seeing people from other countries come to the United States to represent themselves. As to being a lawyer, it was a career path. I was not going to be a doctor. I wasn't going to be an engineer. I wasn't going to be a minister either. But those were the kind of career options that were there at the time for women. And I did find myself at Harvard Law School, and I will tell you the funny story, which I tell everyone, but it's interesting to me. I was in my second year. I had a corporate law and finance professor um, who was crew cut, bow tied, and tweed jacketed, the real stereotype of what a Harvard law professor might be. And I remember he asked the class, you know, there are about 300 or 400 of us in a class, you know, early years. And he asked what considerations a board of directors should take into account in making a decision about a company. And I remember raising my hands and saying so long ago that there are certain environmental and social considerations that a board should consider. And there were titters and laughter, you know, that I could hear behind me. And I remember him saying, looking me directly in the eye and saying, Miss Assevero, the only consideration is profit. And this is a long time ago, right? Decades. And I thought to myself, I'm not in the right place. This is not the right place for me. But nevertheless, I persevered. But you know, of all the anecdotes that I could tell about my law school life, that's the one that stands out for me. And ultimately, I was on the board of a New York Stock Exchange company, and I was on that board specifically to deal with issues of sustainability, environmental protection, what happens when companies, especially energy companies, move into neighborhoods and have to deal with the effects of their operations. You know, these are always balancing things that one has to do. You know, we need energy to supply our modern equipment, but on the other hand, we don't need to drink polluted air and water. Where is the balance? So I think that in a little nutshell is kind of the movement from just the straight up corporate idea of the law and to moving into real advocacy in the positions where law is in fact made, because the law is one of our most enduring institutions and most enduring ways that we actually have of trying to come to some common ground where people understand rules.
So, because I know you a bit, and I've had the great privilege of working with you a wee little bit, especially in the context of the Temple of Understanding, where both of us are board members. Um, I'm going to push a wee bit back just to get you to say a little bit more. So, we've this professor who looked you in the eye and said, Miss Assevero, the only consideration is profit. Don't you think that that way of thinking is still pretty common in many a corporate sector? As in, he was kind of speaking his truth and the truth of so many others, which may be a bit of what, especially in the United States of America, given the rise of the corporate right and might, may be causing some of the issues we're confronting in terms of utter lack of respect for resources, where they come from, people who are not well off, utter lack of respect for people who are not well off and struggling to make ends meet. Do you not think that, in spite of your trajectory, your own personal amazing trajectory, that we are actually confronting that kind of fundamentalism in our business and private sector spaces? Or do you actually see that there's been a change that reflects your own? In other words, what you've done is not an anomaly. How you've transitioned is not an anomaly, but could it be part of a more widespread phenomenon where those who originally worked for profit and profit alone are today able to be better advocates for our common well-being? What do you think?
Well, Asa, I gave the anecdote to to explain where my corporate finance professor was. He had a job to do, and he was doing it because you're producing. This is the thing with education, that while there is mind opening, and I'm a firm advocate for education, I have to say. And Intense, the Ivy League has had, does extraordinary work in research and so on. And I don't want to see institutions of higher learning attacked at all. The diversity that is there in terms of the width and breadth of different opinions is not where it should be, probably never will be, but I think there is aspiration, which is in a mode of an ebb and a flow. Okay, there's an ebb and a flow to uh, how to say it, the collective thinking, the people who do polls and that kind of thinking, where we decide that, oh, this is the trend. Now, to get to your specific question about where we are today in our world, there is definitely an intense inequality caused by monopoly capitalism. Okay, I think that everyone, in fact, even the Wall Street Journal the other day acknowledged that there was something wrong. And that is in the rise, due to the rise in the popularity of, quote, democratic socialism, which I'm not going to jump into here, but it is a statement that the democratic institutions that were buttressed by the market. Okay, so these two things were always separate: the market economy and democracy. Those are two separate things. However, in the United States of America, in particular, it wasn't the mercantilism of the old Europeans or anything like that. It was democracy and the free market are intertwined partners, and there really is no separation. So the free market is a democratic place where if you're an entrepreneur, you can come, you can decide you want to make widgets, and if you can go to your bank and get a loan, you can start to make widgets and employ people, and maybe your widgets are, something wonderful. I don't know what is the most wonderful, a non-synthetic fertilizer. Let's say you're doing something like that as opposed to maybe a microwave or a TV. So I think that is where the confusion is. And we are seeing a push to, I don't know if we want to call it right and left. I'm very I feel very tentative about the language we're using these days to describe some of these things. Economics is a field of study, and the markets are fields of study, and we have to keep them separate from how we as human beings and unfortunately for me, nationalities, because I do think we are in a planetary world right now, and that we should be citizens of planet Earth. But I know that is a far leap for many people at this moment in time. It's not a far leap for everybody. There are colleagues that I know who think the same way that I do. We are citizens of planet Earth. We are souls in the universe. But yes, we have people who are entrenched and who believe in this system, and some of them are greedy and unthoughtful and do not want to see any trickle down, trickle anywhere of the benefits of some of the things that they have created. So, the question is a complex one. We have what 203 nations in the world. Everybody struggles with how to get to a balance where they can have a market, buy goods and services that are needed, create goods and services, and still live in harmony where people talk to each other about how they want to be governed. So it's a long answer, but I hope you can see some of the threads. There's no dogmatism for me in these conversations.
And what do you attribute the fact that you have that open-mindedness and critical questioning and ability to move from dogma to a realism and pragmatism? What do you attribute that to in yourself?
Um, my upbringing. My parents were West Indian immigrants. My father from Trinidad, he left, he became a doctor in the United States, a pediatrician. My mother was actually born in the States and she was of Jamaican parentage. And, these are people coming out of colonialism. Education was absolutely everything. Education was seen as that sliding board to professionalism and to economic stability and just growth. And I just grew up around books. And I have to say, this is so funny because I had a young colleague here and we were talking, and she told me when I was saying, well, haven't you read such and such? And she looked at me and she said, Vicki, you have to understand, everybody didn't grow up with books in their house. And I was taken aback. And like the woman, Monica, we were talking about, the arrogance of knowledge and the humility of wisdom, which is her quote. And it's very true that knowledge and access to knowledge and learning is a privilege. And privilege is not something that you see. Privilege is something that you are bathed in, like fish are bathed in the sea. It's an invisible attribute of an upbringing and a way of being. And in my family, we were taught to question, to push back. I mean, my father, there were certain borders where you couldn't push back, but, in terms of curiosity, we were free to be curious and to learn. And he encouraged that, and as did my mother. So I think and I worry a lot because, literacy in the United States is tumbling. And only part of that is due to our scrolling and doom scrolling and attention losing use of our cell phones and other social media platforms. But when you cannot read and write, you will not know when you are being lied to.
Mm.
And this for me, and in preparation, I was thinking about this in preparation for our conversation today. And to bring faith here, there is a passage from Ephesians where it says, we will not be influenced when people try to trick us. I have to put on my glasses so I can read my own writing. Try to trick us with lies so clever that they sound like the truth.
Mm.
We will not be influenced when people try to trick us with lies so clever they sound like the truth. And this is the book of Daniel, and it goes on to tell us that truth will be overthrown. And I do believe that we are living in times where truth is being overthrown. We even have a platform called Truth Social, which, I didn't think about until I read that passage from the New Living Translation, which I happen to like. It's a much more modern version of the Bible. But if you don't have critical thinking skills, you will not intuit that there's something wrong in what people are telling you. And especially now that our eyes can also lie, that I can have a picture of Aza saying something like, oh, by the way, I am such a free marketeer. And there will be a video of you saying that. And I think faith has no place in our modern discourse. And I will see your face, I will see your mouth moving, and it will not be you. It will be something that is called a fake or
AI
a deep
generated.
fake.
Yes, indeed, indeed. We do live in that era. I just have to push back a little bit against
Sure.
the notion that it's only literacy that can give that sense of, wait a minute, I think I'm being lied to. I think the sensitivity, and I can speak to my own grandparents who were illiterate, at least two grandmothers,
Mhm.
and yet they were the most sensitive to what was going on around them. They could tell a lie from a truth any time of the day. They brought up children and children's children. And I know from many, many people in my community, especially the older generation, that didn't have a chance to get educated at all, that it doesn't necessarily require learning to read and write, that there's something else there
Totally agreed.
that it's not to say that it's okay not to know how to read and write when you have every single opportunity to do so. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that
Oh,
I think I
I
think
hear
read,
you.
write, and plus plus, and it's that other intangible competence to be wise, to actually have wisdom that is deeper than the ages. That intangible that I think we've overlooked because we're so focused on the reading and writing, which of course we should be. But being focused on reading and writing should not take away from the value added of what experience around the world has taught so many and continues to in a particular way that enables especially women to have that sixth or whatever, seventh, eighth sense, that even if they can't read or write, they can look you in the eye and figure out, nah, nah. They can see right through. And I want us to keep that wonder. I want us to keep that amazement in our sense of appreciation of one another. Yes, we're seeing a world where falsehood dominates, rules in Islamic terminology, we call it jahiliyyah, ignorance. It is general ignorance. Because it's true. It's the arrogance of knowledge, which equals ignorance. If you think you're so darn well informed and you know it all, you're ignorant. Um, so it is that age that we're living in, but it isn't necessarily immediately equal to illiteracy.
I totally agree, Aza. You asked me about myself.
Mhm.
And when, these are personal, why do I think that I am that way? And I am that way because of that particular upbringing, which is, I ran the Green Market, which was essentially a farmer's market. And we had people of many varied levels of education, some not literate in the typical sense of the word. And they taught me so much because of their knowledge. And I want to come back to your point because it's an extremely important point. There is ancestral wisdom. There is knowledge embedded in our genes. E.O. Wilson will talk to you about that. We have an intuition. Much of my education was about removing any sense of that intuition being valid as a way of learning. So we have what we call the miseducation of people. You're educated, you're literate, but you've learned only through one frame of looking at things. And one has to learn to remove the frame to be able to see outside of it. And of course, in our world and the world that we're trying to build, to actually have the capacity for redesign, because this is really what we're talking about, how we redesign our world. People are talking about, oh, can you tinker? Can you do some rehabilitation, a little bit here and there, clean up your kitchen, put in a new stove, but behind the new stove is a set of bad wiring, which is going to blow up the new stove in any event. So, and I will, just give my hats off. I did a interview, a little panel with some young farmers for the Temple of Understanding, and they were all, it was amazing, PhDs, and one was a fourth year veterinary student. And one of the young men, he said, well, you have AI, which is artificial intelligence, but you also have ancestral intelligence. And the problem with it is that it is not written down. And I have another anecdote where my friend, who was an anthropologist in Africa, she was in Niger specifically, and the people were growing their crops in circles. And the aid workers said this was inefficient and they should grow in rows, and nobody could explain why they were growing in circles because it wasn't written down and they couldn't really remember. So it's just a tradition and a pattern. But then they found someone who explained about pest control and intercropping, and that's why they do it, which is where we are coming to once again out of our industrial agriculture, where we're growing in rows so the machines can go down the rows and spray and all of that. And we are learning that maybe it will make a big difference if we plant different crops. It will confuse the pests and all of these things, the invasive species that come in. But when you can't explain why you do something, then you see that arrogance of knowledge, or that frame in which the knowledge was developed, cannot be broken, and you have some of the disasters we've had in agriculture around the world.
Pretty wise, I would think. And thank you for sharing that. It's important that you mention that, because that is one of the many things the Temple of Understanding provides, is that area, that space for wisdom, shared wisdom. To come to our world today in the context of specifically faith and leadership and women's roles, and very often, I think, but I welcome you pushing back and debating this, is we often see that women are often presented as an alternative. Women, when they lead, will do better. Per definition, because they're women, they're going to do better. And I have a lot of issues to take with that, because it's not one person in a leadership position that can change everything. It certainly can influence, absolutely, but it often takes a movement that is, yes, of course, led, but in looking at history and studying social movements, it takes a great deal more than one person to make the kind of critical mass that will come together and implement the changes or the transformations or effect something different. But at the same time, I think that narrative of women are better, subliminally or implicitly, women are better.
Who says that?
Well, it's an implicit narrative in a lot of our sociology, political science, feminist studies, the whole tamasha.
Okay.
You have women in the leader. We don't have enough women in leadership. That's why the world is the way it is. We need to have at least X amount of women, 30%, 50% in leadership positions in all places, in order to begin to see things done better. it's part of the sort of lore, if you will, the folklore of the 20th century in particular, but also obviously the century we're in. So I was curious about your take on that and how you see, what do you think is the kind of transformative leadership that you have yourself undergone, but also led? Maybe just reflect on that a bit.
Yeah. Um, I never really think of myself as a feminist, although I know that I am. Um, I and you know you're bringing up the issue of what does diversity truly mean for leadership. Now, women are different than men, just physically, biologically, and so on. Are women truly more nurturing? This is what it is. I think of the Prime Minister of New Zealand. I think of Mrs. Robinson in Ireland, but then I think of Mrs. Thatcher. I think of, even Indira Gandhi. I think of the lady in Bangladesh who was just recently removed. So it's clearly not only, it is not necessarily a feminine characteristic. But on the other hand, I did see Amy Coney Barrett and Elena Kagan in front of a House or Senate subcommittee talking about the need for security at the court, at the Supreme Court in the United States, since you have an international audience here. And it was remarkable the level of civility that was apparent, especially because we have seen such horrible yelling and screaming in the halls of Congress when people come before it for information or for hearings or for approvals. And so one has to say, and the two of them were very civil and acknowledge their differences over ideas and philosophies. They were able to do that and still talk about something that was common, a common cause that they had. And I think that there is that. I think that that is what we need to look for when we look for the diversity of our world, that you have to go and look to see if people's attitudes are really different. And this brings us clearly to your question about leadership and about the role of empathy, the role of deep listening, being able to listen without making up a response in your head right away, just listening and hearing. And are these the qualities that we are looking for from people who have had diverse experiences? Because empathy will play out differently for someone who, let's say, is the child of a millionaire than it might play out for a street child in Senegal, you see. And whether how is the commonality of their empathy? How do we put that forward as a quality that we would like to see no matter where you come from? Is that possible for us to look for these kinds of things? You know, we want to, we're in a moral crisis. There's no question about that. We don't have a common morality
Wait,
anymore.
wait, wait, that's brilliant. Now, can you please elaborate why you think this is a what do you mean we're in a moral crisis? Do we not have values? Do we not have major faith traditions that influence us? Do we not have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? What are you specifically thinking of when you say we have a crisis of morality?
Well, the first crisis of morality for me is civility. Okay, that is the first level of the crisis. Whether or not, if we want to talk about faith, can someone be a Muslim? Can they be a Buddhist? Can they be a Christian? And hold enough respect for someone else that they will be civil in the conversation, which means they will not demonize, they will not denigrate, they will listen.
But
And they
is that a crisis of morality, or is that a crisis of implementation of our common moral values?
Well, you see, I don't, where are the common moral values? I I just simply don't know. I don't know if I can answer. I look and I try to compare what the moral values are in the world's major religions. Major religions. Um, they seem to be very much the same in terms of compassion, love, stewardship of this amazingly abundant and beautiful earth on which we live, with all these species, some of which we are eliminating at a very rapid pace. We are polluting our waterways. Where is it? There's a morality to stewardship. But, we have to be in civil conversation. And, by civility, I think I mean respect. When you respect someone, you listen to them generally, or even if you have a difference of opinion with them, you don't denigrate them. And this is on a truly interpersonal level. And so, the right and the left. I mean, in America at this point in time, there's screaming, there's denigration, insults. This is, the next thing you know, you'll pick up a baseball bat and hit somebody in the head,
Yeah.
which is also
Yeah.
happening.
God help us. I think that's a really good point, because I do believe it's important, Vicky, for us to not throw out the baby with the bathwater. We have currently got some pretty horrible bathwater. It's dirty, it's stinking. Um, People's behaviors are unbelievably atrocious sometimes, if not most of the time. Even in common, uh, normal conversations, you accidentally stand in front of someone and you get, you're lucky to be alive, kind of thing. From that to the genocide that's being perpetuated, I think you're absolutely right. The water is stinking something bad. But does that mean that we've got to get rid of the baby and the bathwater, or do we need to see what do we have as still common moral values that we may not be implementing, honoring,
Or
um,
understanding.
or
You
perhaps indeed. But I
see,
think, is it not important, do you think, to hold on to the baby
well,
that we all see and need? And
you're equating this baby with purity and the moral values
well,
that
yeah,
have.
with a shared morality that has brought us this far, that is actually what informs international law, international human rights law, international humanitarian law, and the laws of our own respective nations. We do have standards, we do have principles. We're not starting from scratch in the Neanderthal age. And I think wondering where we are going to because I've heard this in many corridors, we need to remoralize ourselves. Like, what? Find a new religion, find a new set of beliefs, or is it that we have actually failed the very principles we have and have had for centuries of human
If
existence,
not millennia.
if not
Um,
millennia?
if not
So
millennia.
exactly. So and that is a question, because I think it's very easy to fall into that space about, well, that's it, we've lost morality. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, let's look at a common heritage of our humanity. Let's look at the fact that we do have international law, because you see, those who disobey or completely trash international law are the ones who are completely trashing morality. But does that mean that the rest of us have to now start from scratch? Or does it mean that we have to now see what we have that is worthwhile to protect and exemplify the honoring of that morality ourselves in a very different way? So would I want to cede everything I have in terms of values and principles due to the behavior of certain people? Or do I actually want to hold on even stronger and find out who's with me, who agrees to these values and principles that have kept us and sustained our humanity for so long? Do I want to let go of international law because we don't need it anymore, because it's being trashed? Or do I actually want to struggle to keep international law in the primary space that it requires? Which space do I want to be in? Or do I want to go and create another set of international norms and values?
Well, you as you know, Aza, you are asking very complicated questions, but what I wrote down was the common heritage of morality. And, I don't think that you have to throw out anything historical that is valid and that works in our present day. My problem, I think, is with the word common heritage, because I am understanding that we are living through a moment where it is the commonality of that heritage that is more in question than the morality. Because so long as the common heritage was, let's just be really specific, post World War II, when Bretton Woods set up this system, why is it that if you have a meritocracy, as someone asked the other day, the head of the IMF is always going to be a European and the head of the World Bank is always going to be an American? Why is that in our common heritage of morality? So what has happened, and this is the point that I truly like to harp on, it's my hobby horse, it's that language now is evading us in terms of forging the commonality that we need. Because yes, we definitely, if you talk to, I think, religious scholars, spiritual people, they will see great commonality. I mean, me personally, every morning I read my Bible. I have 2 apps where I do that. I listen to Sadhguru talking, and I have a set of meditations that I do that come from Buddhism or, other meditatives from Sufism, other meditative traditions. So I do that to ground myself every morning. And I know that there are lots of people out in the world who do those things. They may practice yoga, or you want to ask a question.
Aren't those common values? Isn't that a common heritage?
A common striving, no question about that. But you see, and you're making me, you're forcing me to dissect. So what is our problem? That there are people who are too powerful, who have too much control of the media and the arms and the other things that make people afraid to speak and afraid to talk about these things, that are saying what is common is not common to you. It's only common to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that was a question, right? Do we want to defer to them and agree with them and go
Right.
find something else? Or do we want to fight for that which we do know is common to us? And it is about decency, it is about integrity, it is about honoring our age-old, like you said, millennial values and realities. Do we want to defer to that?
It's not
for it all?
It's not deference. It is when somebody tells you that the sun rises in the east, and they say that every morning, the sun rises in the west, and they say it every morning. And, we get into the Orwellian world where we start to also say things that we know are not true. And that's why I say that human beings are, we have AI, it's a large language learning model. It learns about us. The machines learn about us as sentient human beings by how we express ourselves. And that is language. And if people have hijacked the language, then we have a problem. I don't know how to solve that problem, but the problem is that the language itself has been hijacked, and it is repeated throughout so much mental space of people through the media all different kinds of media. Didn't someone die for misinformation in the media, not to speak about the children who are now friends with their AI, and the AI tells them to go do things. And, there's a whole series of things going on. So my own thought, which is extremely nascent, is that we have to come up with a new language for what we want. And this commonality, the collective, there's somebody here who's head of a new private sector organization, and they came up with the word co-opetition. So cooperation and competition in the same word, co-opetition, okay? And, while we laugh when we hear some of the neologisms, it is true that we have to forge a language. We can take back some of it, but it will be very difficult because now it's ingrained very quickly in how people think about what it means. I mean, go and ask Mr. Putin's Archbishop of the Russian Orthodox Church if he has a common heritage with the head of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. Go and ask him.
That's precisely why I'm saying, do the politicians determine whether we've lost our morality or not?
Well, he is
I think these are politicians. They are primarily politicians. And I think religion actually is the original space of politics. We didn't have politics without religion, never did. I think back to what I've learned about the pharaonic history. Pharaoh was a religious leader by excellence and a political leader and a social leader and everything else. So actually, our modern day politicians are the newbies. The ground they walk on is the ground and the institutions created by religions and the languages of religions, not necessarily at their best. But I wouldn't necessarily decide to reinvent a new language of morality because our religious and political leaders have failed so miserably and continue to lead us into the road to something very akin to hell. I would want to hold on, but those are different perspectives, and I appreciate yours very, very much. Mm-hmm. You brought up AI, which I think is an area of it's a world. It's a brand new world. It's like a totally different planet, and I think I'm not well qualified to speak of it, but I do think it'll be increasingly important to become much more learned and wise about the realms of AI. But even AI cannot make the sun come out from the west. Right. And I think some of that is what I hold on to in terms of what we know from our own, that ancient wisdom, that those moralities, and in all holy books, scriptures, but also in the common language of all faiths, including indigenous traditions, the sun really does come out from the east and it sets in the west. And that's like, you can agree or disagree about a whole bunch of other things, but we kind of watch nature and it determines a heck of a lot for us, and that's important. And that's the essential wisdom of faith traditions. It's related to nature, completely related to nature.
Absolutely.
And that's what you enacted in your own green project and the market, and it was that kind of respect to the origins, if you will, and Absolutely. Learning to honor them through our daily practices. And that's why I think you've actually enacted, you've provided the system of leadership that did not question our morality, but that in fact brought out the best of our shared morality. Those are the kinds of leaders like you that we need. We need to see more. Right. We need to see more of the work that you spearhead and steward with others. That's the kind of leadership that we're blessed to have. So I want to thank you, Vicki-Ann Assevero. I want to thank you for a remarkable discussion and conversation. And
so interesting.
And I look forward to seeing you lead us into even more brilliant, greener pastures, literally.
Yes, I want part two. I have many questions of my own. I, don't know about the leadership part, but I do know that nature is amazing and that it is true that every faith tradition treasures the amazing abundance that we have and the beauty, you see, because beauty is a moral value too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Asa, for inviting me and making this day one where I will reflect all day long.
Thank you for being you, Vicki-Ann. We're very, very fortunate to have you amongst us. Thank you.
Okay, take care, Asa. Bye-bye.